In this video, I want to demonstrate how to take the facing passes off the top of our part here. So I've gone ahead and I've cut and pasted the code we wrote earlier for the facing tool. And we're going to use a 3/4 inch carbide end mill. We've already roughed this end and these two radii using a 3/8 carbide end mill to rough and another 3/8 carbide end mill to finish. And because our facing tool is twice the diameter of these, I've used an RPM that's half of this diameter. Next, we need to calculate out all our positions. The other thing we need to do is decide which way are we going to cut. Well, I'm going to program the tool to come across the long ways, move up and back and forth across. And I need to figure out how many passes I'm going to take. Well, first I'm using a 3/4 inch end mill. And the recommendation when facing is that you use 70% of your cutter. So I'm going to multiply that by 0.7 and I get 0.525. So now I want to figure out how many passes at 0.525 are required in my y-axis. So I'll clear this, and the part thickness is just shy of 1.5 inches, so I'll put in 1.5 inches, and I'll divide by 0.525, and that equals 3 passes. So now that I know I want to take 3 equal passes of essentially 1/2 inch each, using my 3/4 cutter, I need to figure out those positions. Since we're programming the rough facing tool, I've gone ahead and said Z coordinate is plus 10 thou. The finish facing tool will remove that final 10 thou and get this part to the proper thickness on top. So next we need to calculate our positions for the cutter center at all 6 of these locations as shown. And we'll start with the X position here, which will be the same for 1, 4, and 5. The first thing I can see is they'll all be negative. So for the X positions 1, 4, and 5, I'll go ahead and add the negative sign. I can also see the center of the cutter will be negative in all the Y's. So if I want, I can add the negative here as well. And now I want to calculate where the cutter center will be here in the X for position 1. This distance is marked as 160 thou because I'm showing the finished part here. And as you recall, there's a 1/16 of material to come off each end. And I would like the edge of the cutter to be 100 thou away from the raw material when I first bring it in. So that gives this distance of 160 thou. If I were to program the X at negative 0.160, that would put the center of the cutter here. And that's not what I want. So I need to get the edge of the cutter at negative 160. So the center of the cutter is another negative by its radius of 3/8. So I'm going to minus 0.375 from there. I'll just pull the calculator up. So if I enter negative 0.160 minus 0.375, my X coordinate's negative 5.35. And I'll bring the calculator back up and clear that. Next, I'll calculate the cutter center at position 2, 3, and 6 for the X. To calculate these positions, come back to my calculator. If I were to program X 1.969, that would put the center of the cutter here. So again, I have to add the 160 plus the radius of the cutter. So I'm going to say plus the 0.16 plus the 0.375, the radius of the cutter. And that gives me an X at 2, 3, and 4 of plus 2.504. 2.504 in each of these fields. And I'll bring the calculator back. So again, to calculate each X position, if I put the center of the cutter here, then I move negative 160 and then negative the radius of the cutter, I get the 0.535. If I put the center of the cutter on the part length of 1.969 and then I move the 160 plus the radius of the cutter, I get 2.504. Next I want to figure out the Y position for each one of these cuts. So we'll start by calculating the Y position of the center of the cutter at 1 and 2. And as we already determined, we would like the cutter to remove 1/2 inch with each pass. So once again, let's start with putting the center of the cutter right here on the bottom, negative 1.496. I'll enter that in the calculator, negative 1.496. Now if I were to put the cutter there, it would remove 3/8 of material, the distance from the center to here. But I would like it to move 1/2 inch. What this means is I need to take the center of the cutter 1/8 of an inch this way. So to this, I'm going to add 0.125. So my Y at position 1 and 2 is negative 1.371. To calculate the cutter center at position 4 and 3, I need to move the cutter up 1/2 inch. If I move it up 1/2 inch in the Y positive direction from where it currently is, then it will remove a 1/2 inch material what I'm after. So I'll come back to my calculator and I'll enter the negative 1.371, and then I'll add a 1/2 inch. So for 3 and 4, my cutter center will be at negative 0.871. Since I've taken a 1/2 inch of material this way and a 1/2 inch material when I came back, there's only the 1/2 inch of material left. So what I would like to do is put the cutter center so it overlaps this cut a bit. If I only move it down 1/8 of an inch, this edge will be right here. So I'm going to program for 5 and 6 negative 1/4 inch, and then I have a bit of overlap here and I have overlap here. Now that I've calculated all my X and Y positions, in the next video we'll add these to the code and simulate the facing toolpath.